Welcome to the Happy Dog, Happy Human podcast, where we explore the intersection between human mental health and our relationships with dogs. This is Sharon.
And I'm Angela. In season 2, we're exploring social and cultural phenomena that impact our well-being so we can reduce stigma and challenge the status quo, while also learning better ways to care for ourselves and our dogs throughout the journey. We hope you love it.
Hey, everybody, it's Sharon.
And this is Angela, and welcome to this episode. We are going to be talking about toxic positivity for humans. And in this episode, we will first cover what toxic positivity means. And we'll talk about how it has impacted us individually, our thoughts around toxic positivity, maybe where it comes from. And then we'll move into a short break where you'll hear from our sponsor. And after the break, we will discuss ways to challenge and combat toxic positivity within yourself and also with people around you. I also forgot to add that we're going to take a couple breaths before we start for ourselves to get grounded and focused and reset our nervous systems before this conversation. Are you ready, Sharon?
I am ready. Let's do some breaths.
Okay.
That was really nice. I always love taking a couple of breaths.
Me too, because I tend to forget to take breaths during the day. So sometimes this is like my first time doing that.
Yeah, like stop holding your breath and start breathing again.
Exactly. Well, I always notice if we do it with not structured, I end up breathing through my chest first. I'm like, wait a second, like I need to take belly breaths, but that's how I'm just breathing most of the day is through my chest, and it's shallow, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so good to be aware of that, I think, to just be like, what is my body doing?
Absolutely. So we are talking about toxic positivity today, and I admittedly had to look up what it was because I
I did
wanted
too.
Well, I just wanted to make sure because it is one of those words, or two words in this case, that we, hear thrown around a lot. And I think like we're doing a lot of these podcast episodes about these terms that you hear thrown around a lot, that are often describing something like some big cultural phenomenon. So I think, yeah, it's important to look at what they actually mean, because we may be saying things and they may have different meanings also. So I did do that. But when talking about what it means, I actually went straight to more of the things I hear that are toxic positivity and make me feel a certain way. So that's how I want to describe it.
Yeah. So what do you hear?
So what I hear, so things that hear and see, because I see a lot of this also on social media, and I think a lot of our cultural phenomenons are all over the internet now. So hear and see things like stay positive, things like
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. It's going to be okay. We were also talking. Sorry, what?
It could be worse.
It could be worse. Things like positive vibes only, which is something we're saying on t-shirts a lot. That's like, it's like a fun saying, but it does come from the place of, okay, we don't allow any other types of feelings, only positive vibes. So that can definitely be interpreted from a place of toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And so in general, the idea is when you have a negative emotion or somebody has a negative emotion, oftentimes we steamroll that because we don't want to feel bad. And we don't want the other person to feel bad. So we minimize or try to make it better by saying these sort of quick, positive, adages.
Mm-hmm.
And that can feel very dismissive on the other end.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about even labeling some emotions as positive and some as negative. That in itself, like, sort of sends a message that certain emotions are not okay to have or express or to feel, like only the positive ones and the negative ones are bad in some way.
I totally agree with that. And, I think that goes back a couple of episodes when we were talking about how culturally and people, we tend to be attracted to contrast. And so positive and negative, those two are contrasting words, right? And so maybe you hear in a couple, someone says, well, I'm the positive one and you're the negative one, for example. And so that you're labeling people and you're putting them also in a box, and there's no space for nuance. Or I'm a negative person and you're a positive person, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's interesting too is, of course, I think in general, when you and I are talking about these things, we're talking about the lack of nuance. So I just said that again. And I definitely want to talk about optimism, because optimism and toxic positivity are two very different things. And optimism is important, right?
Yeah.
Also, and staying hopeful and, and that's another thing. People are like, I'm optimistic and you're pessimistic, but there is a spectrum of those things depending on what's going on also. So that's also different, because I think some people can come back and say like, oh, well, are you saying that we shouldn't be positive or optimistic about certain things, which is not how I'm thinking about it or how you're thinking about it.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about the toxic part of toxic positivity. And it's like, I'm hearing what you're saying is like the toxic part is only having room for emotions that are maybe comfortable or seen as pleasant or bright in some way, like happiness, enthusiasm, optimism, these types of things, and then not having any room for anything that is uncomfortable. So, like sadness or grief or anger or things like that, or hopelessness or despair, But so, like, when you are not in community or in relationship with people who allow you to, or who make room for those emotions or for all the emotions, then you get some emotions that you're sort of just like stuffing down into your body, and it actually like festers and becomes like illness in your body.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that happens when you say things like, stay positive to someone who may be struggling, you may be unintentionally shaming them also, which is what you're describing. And shame festers, especially if it has nowhere to go. If you can't describe your shame, if you can't talk about it, and if someone becomes ashamed of their feelings, it gets stuck, right? So, so I was thinking in terms of myself, actually, it was interesting. Two things sort of came up for me, but I'll start with the first. Is I feel like a lot of my life, I get told a lot, because I tend to be pretty honest and straightforward about what I'm thinking and feeling. And I've been told a lot of times in my life, like, Angela, don't say that, because it's an uncomfortable feeling to have somebody be so vocal about like what's really going on. And it's happened to me a lot in work settings, actually.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think in situations where people want to say like, everything is fine, that's another one, right? Everything is fine.
Yeah.
When the house is burning down, like everything is not fine. Like that's another sort of example.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking of a specific example because I'm similar to you in that like I have a like really strong innate urge to say like what is happening, even if it's even if nobody else is, or even if it's terrible, or even if we're not supposed to. And like I want to stop everything and address it. And so you mentioned work, and a long time ago I used to work at a dog kennel, and it was like a combination like boarding facility and doggy daycare. And there was one day we were just getting started out, and there was one day where there were like two or three incidents, like scuffles between the dogs in the dog daycare, like in a row. And I was like, I wanted to stop everything. So I was like, don't take any more dogs in for daycare today. Like, we need to figure out what's going on and make sure that it's safe. And my employers were like so angry with me for doing that, because they were like, we can't close the daycare. What are people going to think? And I'm like, but it's not safe. We need to like figure out what's happening so that the dogs aren't fighting with each other. And they were like really threatened by that.
Wow, I think that's a really good example because it brings up a lot of feelings for the other people, right? Like they're concerned about what other people are going to think. I think toxic positivity comes from that also, this like need for upholding image.
Mm-hmm.
And also not just wanting to ignore what's difficult in front of them, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, they also don't want to show, I guess this is like keeping image, but like don't want to show any weakness, or like admit that everything's not perfect.
Right, that there might be difficulties or things going on that are not up to, I guess, their own expectations. And I think that's why there's like multiple layers there, right? Like you have this sort of like, societal social need to like seem strong and put together and a sunny demeanor, perfect, right? But then there's the other piece of it where inside of us we may struggle with of course, naturally we struggle with other people's difficult feelings and difficult things, and it's hard to sit with difficult things, very, very difficult. And difficult emotions, and that is also, and it's human, of course, it makes sense. So there's kind of like a multi-layer thing going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, the like dynamic between human beings, because it's like when somebody that you care about is not doing well, sometimes that can impact the relationship or the level of connection that you feel with them. Or sometimes you feel responsible for their well-being, and then you like feel like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Because I must have done something wrong if you're hurting in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a really, I think, a good example to highlight what you're saying, that has to do with parenting. And, I have a young child, and I noticed that my natural responses when she's hurt or in pain, my first, my therapist calls it a shitty first draft. I love it. So I'm going to say here, my shitty first draft is to say, you're okay. Everything is fine. If she falls, for example, or if she tells me she doesn't want to go to school, why not? You have fun at school. School is great.
Ooh,
That is my shitty first draft. Like that's what comes up. And it's really hard to, as a parent, like you feel their pain worse than you feel your own pain. And so that is just a very hard thing to sit with, and to sit with the fact that your kid just hurt themselves. And so your first reaction is to make it go away. But what's really happening is that you're diminishing their feelings. So they might be hurt, or they might have sadness around going to school, for example. And by saying it's okay, you're fine, everything is fine, the message that they may interpret is you're not allowed to have feelings that are not positive or
Mhm.
difficult feelings or big feelings,
Mhm.
whatever they may be.
Yeah. Yeah. So then they get the perception that it's the feeling or like them having that feeling that's not acceptable or appropriate. And then they learn to like stuff it in.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, that's going to create adults that are then filled with shame and feeling like they need to have this sunny demeanor that we're talking about, and that's the cycle. Um, but it is interesting that, of course, like human beings, our natural response is, yeah, we don't want to feel difficult things. So in sort of challenging toxic positivity, we are challenging ourselves to sit with discomfort
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pain.
Right. And that takes skill, I think, and practice. It's because thinking about if we've been raised with those responses, those shitty first drafts of like everything's fine, then we don't learn how to deal with our own difficult emotions or uncomfortable emotions. And then we grow up and still don't know how to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think our generation of parenting is trying to do it different in the sense of trying to validate our young children's emotions and whatever they're feeling and telling them it's okay to feel those things.
Mhm.
Um, Hopefully that's going to help change future generations in how they speak to each other when it comes to their own difficult feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great way to look at it. You're like, um, planting seeds for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. I think there's a parallel here with dogs that I was thinking about in terms of like when dogs are reactive or like barking at something and they're scared, like they're barking at the delivery person and they're scared that like we're getting attacked right now or something, like there's an intruder, and we're like, no, it's fine, everything's fine, like don't do that, don't bark, don't be scared, just be quiet. And we're really dismissing their feelings that are like from their perception everything is not fine.
Absolutely. And we're not only diminishing their feelings, we're actually like minimizing a potential safety threat, you
Yeah,
know,
right,
because
because
we're
like
not listening to them.
and we do want our dogs to tell us, like I've heard people say like I'm so glad I have a dog because I'm never surprised, or like I want my dog to tell me if somebody is breaking into the house. But
Yeah.
like then you have to let the dog tell you anytime someone is coming to the house, not just when there's an intruder.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And, well, and I think that's also the risk of toxic positivity is that we, with our dog, that's a great example with the dogs and safety, but we often minimize safety issues also, or, we are in denial about things going terribly wrong when they can. I mean, and that's why I was saying earlier, I think of this meme with there's a dog sitting on a chair and like fire all
Oh
over in the
yeah.
background. And he says, everything is
Everything.
fine.
Yeah.
Like that is a lot of society, people, whatever, that like, that's a lot of people do that, right? Like everything is fine and it's not fine. And we're not paying attention to the barking and the
Yeah.
signals.
Yeah.
And, the smoke, that is coming from wherever. And
Right.
so that's also potentially dangerous, emotionally, physically, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think over time, it really impacts how you behave in relationships.
Mm,
Like I think when they're, like with my partner Tom, this comes up a lot with us because I'm the person who is like, we have to pay attention to this. This is important, even though it's uncomfortable. And and Tom is one of those kids who is raised with like everything is fine, And
it's
so
fine.
I will be expressing something challenging to him. Like one time I got an email from a friend and I had asked the friend for like feedback on something, and she wrote the feedback when she was like really frustrated, and so it came across like really mean, and I was really hurt by it, and I was like asking Tom, like I asked Tom to look at it because I was like, don't you think this is mean? Like what is happening here? And his response was that, like, oh, it's not that bad. Maybe she didn't mean it like that, like interpret it
Mm.
differently. And I got more mad because I was like, well, but I'm upset. I'm hurt. Like, it doesn't matter what she meant. And so then, like, if that happens over and over again, where I'm like going to my partner for support and then not getting the support, then I'm going to stop going to my partner
Yes,
for support,
absolutely. Yeah.
and
Well,
so,
and well, what I really like hear there is that you feel unseen and unheard and not validated in the feelings that you're having.
mhm,
Um, yeah, which is going to create resentment, and that's like the ultimate corroder of relationships.
mhm, yeah, yeah. So it's like, it's important to think about how often this is happening. Because I think, like, once in a while, we're going to run out of capacity for having empathy for someone's difficult feelings. And we might say, one of those responses that, like, oh, everything's fine, or at least it's not this bad, and
Yeah.
but if that's constantly the pattern,
Yes.
it's always what's happening, then that's where it becomes toxic.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think, what I was thinking about it also with partnerships, because you're telling me this example, like that's a place where you're living with someone, they know you very well, they know your problems very well. I mean, you might not be living with them, but point is you're spending a lot of time with them,
Yeah.
perhaps for many years. And sometimes, the problems they're having are not new to us anymore, and we're at capacity with other things.
Yeah.
And our shitty first draft is to say, yeah, like, who cares? I don't have time for this, you know? And
Right.
but that also says, and that happens with my kid, for example, also, it's also someone who's living with me and who has big feelings, and they're supposed to have big feelings.
Right.
And yeah, but after spending 24 hours with, a kid who's having a lot of big feelings and is whining, et cetera, like by the end of the day, if the kid falls down, it happens. Like you say, it's fine, it's okay, like just stop.
Right.
And, you know and I
Yeah.
think, but that it doesn't make it okay that we do that. I mean, I think it's okay. It's, we make mistakes and we can repair them, and those things can be forgiven. But I think what that's really telling us is that we need space,
Mm.
and that we need self-care and time to charge our battery, because that's the only way that we can be there for other people, and that we can sit with their uncomfortable feelings as well. We need to be in a space where we can do that.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah. So, and I think that that's also interesting, because that comes with boundaries, of course, like setting your own boundaries. And we're definitely not saying, like, whenever somebody is having a difficult time, that, you just sit with their feelings all the time, because it might not be appropriate. And there needs to be boundaries around that as well. But it's more about like being careful about how you first respond to someone.
Mm.
And even if the response is, wow, like, I don't even know what to say, like that is more validating, or like, I don't know what to say right now, like, I would love to talk to you about this at, later,
Mm.
when I can talk about it. um my friend, that happened to me the other day, my friend sent me this like issue she's been having, and I actually texted her back and I said, you know what, I need actually, like, I think I'm gonna need like 24 hours to think about this. And then
Mm.
I called her this morning and she was like, great, I need to think about it too. And then I called her this morning. I said, okay, I've thought about it. Instead of me saying some quick response, because I just can't deal with it right now. I can't deal with her intensity right now. Instead, I said, I need some time. And I think people don't realize that it's okay to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's such a great point. It's like a component of urgency, right? Because sometimes big
Mhm.
feelings or uncomfortable feelings feel there is an urgency. It's like, I'm not okay. And
Mhm.
I don't, it doesn't feel safe, and I need it to be better, or I need it to be seen right now, and then we feel like there has to be a response from us to make it better, right now.
Yeah. 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 And then and it is, again, like it makes sense that sometimes our quick responses are, it'll be okay. Like that's the easiest thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a reflex. It's like, it's something that you say when you're not really thinking or paying attention. And so what I'm hearing from you
Yeah.
about your story with your friend is that you were really paying attention to yourself and to her.
Yeah, absolutely. In that moment, I felt it coming up. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. I'm not going to say something constructive. Like I started typing something out. I'm like, this is not helpful. So let me just take some time. And when I have some space to think about it, I'll get back to you.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think that does so much to support the relationship, so much more
Yeah.
than trying to make your friend feel better right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, talking about urgency, the thing with the dogs also and barking, it's the same thing. Like, I don't have time for this right now. Like, we really struggle in this sort of modern, quick-paced world. Like, we struggle with having time for things or feeling like we don't have enough time for things.
Yeah.
And yeah, things get thrown under the rug a lot. And I think a lot of times when somebody comes to you with something difficult, if you feel stressed or at your limit, which a lot of us do, then the answer is, yeah, I don't have time for this right now. So I'm just going to say something quick and like move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a common theme in setting boundaries that like we feel guilty about
Mm,
it. And I think that line of like, I don't have time or I don't have capacity for this right now, that's a boundary that's
mm-hmm.
appropriate, but it feels like we're disconnecting from the person who's coming to us for support or sharing something with us when it's actually the opposite. The boundary is meant to maintain connection.
Yeah. Yes. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it is that, because you do break someone's trust and they won't want to come to you if the response is something that it minimizes or invalidates their feelings.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I think, yeah, that stay positive mantra is it's just a way to not deal with difficult things. Like that's sort of where that, I think that's where that's coming from. And I think it's never like on purpose. Like all of this is well intentioned, and it's just, those lines are well intentioned as well. And me saying to my daughter who falls, it's okay, or my dog who's barking out the window, there's nothing there. Like it's all well intentioned and well meaning.
Mm.
um we think we're making people feel better by doing that, but what we're really doing is trying to make ourselves feel better, and we don't realize that.
Yeah. Right. I think like we're trying to show the person who's scared that, look, there is nothing to be scared of. So you don't need to be in this state. The problem is that when someone is in that fearful state, their body is already going through this process, and
Mm,
words can't interrupt that process because like the brain can't process words in that moment. And also the body just doesn't feel safe. So you need to help the body feel safe. And the best way to do that is not by saying you're safe, get over it.
right. Yeah, because that is another one, like just get over it, like that's the same. That sounds pretty gnarly if I say that, but saying something like, other people have it worse, that it's saying the same thing. You're saying
Yeah,
get over it,
right.
and um yeah, that's not validating somebody's existence and their emotions and what they might be going through.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think there's like also a flip side where it's like we have to make sure we are attending to all of the feelings, right? We can't in sort of like trying to resist toxic positivity, we can't only look at the uncomfortable feelings either, or like only be like everything is bad. There has to be a spectrum.
Yes, I do. I definitely agree with that also, because yeah, it's nuanced, right? Like it's not black or white. And we sort of started talking about this, like it's healthy to have a sense of optimism. Like it's healthy to in certain situations, like stay positive, for example, or try to stay positive, because otherwise, like, what are you going to do? Just like sit down and give up, So I think optimism maybe is more parallel with the idea of hopefulness, right? Like that staying hopeful is also part of our survival, and also learning from difficult things. That's sometimes positive things come out of difficult things, and like we can figure those things out and learn from them and say to ourselves, like, okay, I did get something positive out of that. But I also think it just depends where the person is at in their process, right? So if you're coming to someone and, well, I'll give you an example, a personal example. So I don't think I talked about this on the podcast yet, but unfortunately, my goats were eaten by a wolf a few weeks ago. Yeah, it was horrible, and it was really traumatic for me. And if you would have told me in the first 2 weeks, like, maybe you'll learn something from this, other people have it worse, at least they weren't your livelihood. That one's one that you hear. At least they were just like, you weren't getting money from them or something. So that would have felt really horrible at the time. And I couldn't see anything positive out of this, except for like, this is just a horrible thing that happened to me. But now in hindsight, now that I've gone through like the grieving, a lot of the grieving process and had time to think about it, like I can tell you, I think I wish it hadn't happened. It was horrible. But I think what I learned from it, which is positive, is that I need to slow down and that I was taking on too much. And so I did learn something from it. Something positive came out of it in that way. And so, yeah, like I it's more nuanced, right? And like, now that I'm able to focus on the positive, like that's what I'm going to do moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think
Okay.
like humans are really wonderful at making sense of things and making meaning
Yes.
out of things. And I think that is a wonderful way to like honor the legacy of your goats and and keep them with you as you move through life with this like broader perspective about
Yeah.
like what you're doing and how you're spending your days. And I also think it's okay, like if you didn't learn that, or if you couldn't see anything positive about the situation too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true. And so I think, yeah, again, it's nuanced, right? Like sometimes shitty things happen and people can get something positive out of it afterwards. And sometimes they don't. And like, that's also okay, right? Like you hear, this is quite interesting. There's been a lot of studies done more recently in positive psychology on vets, that some people,
Like
veterans of
veterans.
war, yes, veterans of war, that some people come back from war and that they actually have taken positive, they have become like for themselves better people, have taken positive, what's the word? Taken positive out of the experience of going to war and like applied it to their life. And they do these studies because they think it might have to do with resiliency, but I'm using it in this context because some veterans come out and they have post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And so that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the veterans that came out with post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's something right with the people who took positive from it, and I think positive psychology is looking at it because they're saying, well, maybe there is like some factors why one person would take positive and one wouldn't, which is interesting in the long run. But yeah, so again, like I think it's nuanced, but I think it's where the toxic part comes is that we have like the expectation of like staying positive or only positive, right? Like it doesn't have to only be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm thinking about that resiliency piece, right? And like why do some people um end up one way and other people end up another way? And I think it goes back to like how much support the person has, or at least that could be part of it. Like how much support do they have when they're going through this challenging or traumatic experience? And could that be the piece that is contributing to whether or not they have resiliency or not, or can make meaning or
Yeah,
not?
and I think they find a lot of things. I mean, I think they've done a lot of studies on the post-traumatic stress disorder that, people who have had traumas before, or lack of support, or like certain upbringings with like parenting that was traumatic, like those people tend to be much more at risk. So there's like a lot of different factors that goes into it.
Yeah.
Um, but I love what you were saying, that like human beings in general, like we like to make sense of things, and we like to, and we're good at it. We're good at making sense of things, negative things that happen. Um, but at the same time, like we need to respect people in their process,
Mhm.
and if they're in part of the process where like those positive messages does not feel good, and I think that's what the power of over communicating, also like asking, like, what do you need, what feels good to you right now,
Mhm.
and seeing where somebody is at, because sometimes you don't want to be bombarded with all those positive messages. I'm thinking also people diagnosed with cancer, like there's a lot of, okay, stay positive mindset. I know so and so who survived this and that and the other, but it just depends on what that person's going to be feeling a million different things day
Yeah.
to day. And sometimes those positive messages, or that like bombardment of positivity, doesn't necessarily feel good.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You need to be able to um, be present with what is right now, while also
Yeah.
having the support to be able to like move through all the different things that are going on, or all the different feelings that you might be having.
Yeah. And I think the opposite is true also, when somebody is like constantly, maybe they are having something clinical going on, but if somebody's constantly having like difficult emotions, or like constantly in a negative space, um, and no positivity, like that's the flip side, right? Like that's too much in the other direction. And there might be something clinically going on where they really do need further support.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, again, I think it goes back to what we said from the perfectionism episode about contrast and dichotomies, and you know uh, our tendency to like not like nuance,
Mhm. Right.
even though life is nuanced. And so same thing in the spectrum of pessimistic, optimistic, positive, negative, like there are things in between and all around.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to allow for the messiness of life. So I'm feeling curious about how we can stay present and aware of ourselves so that we can respond and show up for the people we care about. So does this feel like a good time to take a little break before we transition to that
Yes,
topic combo?
sounds good.
Cool. We'll see you in a few. We are so grateful to Benson's Pet Center for partnering with us on today's episode. Benson's Pet Center is a multi-generational, family-owned and operated business with 8 locations in the New York Capital Region. Benson's has the largest selection of pet food in the area. If they don't have what you're looking for, they'll even order it for you. You can bring your dog with you to pick out their favorite treats, and you can even give them a bath at the self-serve dog wash in 3 of their locations. Benson's has competitive pricing even on subscription services, and I love knowing that my dollars are supporting a local business. The customer service at Benson's is consistently unparalleled, and the staff's extensive knowledge on pet nutrition is amazing. Can't make it out to the store? No problem. Order online before 3 p.m. on weekdays, and Benson's offers same-day delivery. And curbside pickup is available 7 days a week. Benson's Pet Center, where the motto is, "We love your pets." Thank you, Benson's. Now back to the show.
And we're back. And we want to start this part of the episode with a quote. And just to remind listeners that now we're going to be talking about ways to challenge toxic positivity. And yeah, so the quote is, "It's okay to not be okay."
I love this.
And me too. And it's something that I've been seeing a lot on social media as well, on fashion items, and actually a quote that I've used myself on Cloud Doodles, because it is the perfect antithesis to stay positive or keep feeling good or stay strong. And it validates that it's okay to have difficult feelings, and it's okay to be in a place that you're not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel like there's space for me to spread out when I hear that quote.
Yes. And yeah, you know what? I really like that. That I think maybe with what we were talking about in dichotomy in general, when we're not thinking about nuance, or when we're trying to put someone in that positive box, there's just no room to breathe. That's what
Right,
it
because
feels like.
you're trying to hold it all in.
Yeah. So it's okay to not be okay. It's like, oh, I can like exhale.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what have you found are some other ways to respond besides saying like everything's fine or just stay positive or at least your arm is not falling off or whatever?
At least you're not bleeding to death. You're having like excessive blood loss, but you're not dead, so you're fine.
That's cool.
um, so I think the things that I've even learned just as a social worker, as a therapist, to combat, these sort of natural responses to make someone feel better, a lot of it has to do with meeting someone where they're at. And so ways that we can do that is by telling someone, "I'm here for you," by validating how they're feeling. So reflecting back, I see you're feeling sad. I hear you're feeling angry. Like naming the feeling that somebody else might be experiencing. I actually find sitting in silence is very powerful, and really being in the moment with somebody who's going through something, not saying anything at all.
Yeah, and not leaving either, like not
Yeah.
walking away.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like just sitting with them.
Yeah.
And if that person wants it, like giving them a hug or holding their hand, or whatever,
Mm,
meeting somewhere where they're at, asking what someone may need, and they may not know, and that's also okay.
yeah.
um I think those are all ways of that you're not accidentally minimizing the way somebody is feeling. Do you
Yeah.
have any other ideas?
Um, I like, well, sometimes I think it's about being authentic, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
saying like, wow, I can't even relate to that. Or like, wow, I don't even know what to say. Or that
Mm-hmm.
just sounds like a lot, or I feel that feels overwhelming for me. So I can't imagine how you feel.
Yeah, or like, that sounds really hard. That's when
Yeah.
I feel like I say that a lot, actually. That
Mhm.
sounds really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Tom has started saying that and also doing the thing where he just like stays there, like sitting next to me and not saying anything, which has been so helpful. And I think for a while I was angry, like that I wasn't getting responses that were feeling supportive. And part of like getting through this is not just Tom learning things, it's also me learning
Mhm.
things, and also realizing like Tom's capacity and also making sure like that I do recognize the ways he is being supportive, even if it's not what I initially wanted or thought I needed.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big thing, like again, in relationship. I mean, relationships are mirrors, right? Like they're holding up mirrors to ourselves, to ourselves as well. And it's how do we also, vocalize what we need. And
Right.
on the flip side, right? So when you say something, when you're having a difficult time or difficult feelings, like how do you express that in a safe environment, where that the person has is able to or has been supportive of you in the past. And like something that I've started doing even with my partner, because we are both at capacity with the things that we have going on in our lives, I do ask, like, is this a time and space that I can tell you how I'm feeling, So that's also the flip side of it. So if you're the person experiencing the difficult feelings, like when is it, when and who and where are good places to let that out where you're going to feel supported?
Right. Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is if you're the person who with the difficult feelings who needs support, there's agency in like deciding who to go to for support or when and where. But also a key piece is like knowing what support you need or telling the person how to care for you and not just leaving it up to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't, also we can't expect everyone to answer in ways that are gonna feel good to us, or maybe some people just don't have the capacity because they've never learned how to,
Yeah. Right.
And we can tell them also, like, if we feel comfortable doing that, like what when you say stay positive, that actually really diminishes my feelings and hurts me, because I really do think it comes from like an unintentional, not unintentional, well-intentioned place.
Right.
Like I think people who are, using those adages, it's not in a mean way. Like they're not trying to hurt your feelings, it's learned.
Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to help you in the way that they know how,
Exactly.
when they don't have any uh guidance on how to
Yeah, exactly.
do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
Um,
think I appreciate hearing that because that's something I've struggled with a lot. Like I'll just have these really big feelings and then like go to my partner and be like, "Ma," and then be mad that he doesn't know what to do with me, and it's like, well, really, I have to learn what to do with me. And
yeah,
and then
I
I can
was gonna
teach
say
him
that
how
too.
to do it and not just be like, well, you don't know how to do it. So yeah, I like have to be like, okay, here, okay, this is what I need. And then if I go and tell him, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and can you do this? Then it's like, yeah. And then you're like, oh.
Right.
And then it's
Right. Or
fine.
not right now, maybe tomorrow, like when I have the capacity to do that, that's when I have time. And I completely relate to you because I'm, the same. And I think when I was younger, I definitely like expected other people to make me feel better because I didn't really know how to do it for myself.
Yeah.
And I actually have an example that I wasn't feeling so well recently, and I had like a really big, burst of crying, just feeling really bad. And I expressed it all to my partner, but he was sick, he was at capacity, and he told me like I don't know what to say because he was all, and I felt really hurt by it. But actually, and one of the things I was going to talk about was self-care as an antidote. What I did is I looked inside of myself and I said, okay, you know what? I don't need him to make me feel better right now. What are things that are going to help me get back on track?
Mm,
And I spent the rest of the afternoon doing that.
nice.
And, it might be things that sound silly to other people, but for me, it was what I needed.
Hmm.
And it included staring at my green tea at a sushi restaurant for several minutes. So,
Yes.
um, or, I was laid in bed and watched TV while I worked. Like, again, like this might sound like, for somebody that's like, how is that self-care? But for me, it was.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so again, this is nuance. It's a dance, right? Like how how we deal with our own difficult feelings. How do we approach other people with difficult feelings? When we're approached with someone's difficult feelings, how do we help them feel seen and heard and validated? When we're in a space to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of the challenge is knowing ourselves and observing ourselves so that we can track our capacity and our needs and care for ourselves in ways that we need. And then the other part is being able to recognize other feelings in other people and be able to sometimes set boundaries with them and other times be able to ask them what they need or give them what they're asking for.
Yeah. And I think all of this has to do with like a level of awareness, right? And slowing down. And I think it's not going to our gut reaction and taking a beat before answering someone or answering ourselves even, and taking a deeper look, and I think again, like for me, this whole discussion around toxic positivity like really is highlighted by how you respond to your kid who falls, and if we take a beat and like really look at that moment and then try to respond in a way that's not minimizing their feelings.
Right.
We have to look at ourselves, like, why is this moment leading me to want to minimize their pain? Because, and how do I deal with that within myself? And then how do I respond in a way that is going to be appropriate?
Yeah.
And if I'm not able to do that, how can I get someone else to come in to like take over,
Yes, totally. Yeah. So there's like these moments of big emotions, and then there has to be like the goal is to be aware in those moments of what you need and what the other person needs. But the way to get there is by practicing being aware in all the other moments where there aren't big feelings.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. So I have an example of this, like one of the situations that comes up where I engage in toxic positivity with Muggins is it'll like be evening and Muggins is barking at something outside, and I'm like, maybe I'm like doing the dishes after dinner, and I've like done all the things. Took Muggins on the 3 or 17 walks that they want every day, and we did the care time activities, and we played games, and they're fed, and I'm like, okay, now I just need to do the dishes and relax. And then Muggins is barking at something. So then because Muggins is reactive and has big feelings, I have to get the treats and I have to do some training and I have to help them. And a lot of the times I'm tired and I'm just like, oh, Muggins, like, can't you just not be scared of everything? Or like, stop it. It's fine. And I've learned, because I practice like I journal, for example, a lot to help myself be aware of myself. I'll like journal about something that happened. And because I do that in those moments when Muggins is barking and I'm just be like, oh, can you just stop, please? I've learned to be aware, like, oh, I'm responding to Muggins in a way that's dismissive, or like, I don't have capacity to actually help Muggins right now. And that means I need to ask for help for me. So like, I need to ask my partner, can you help Muggins right now? Or can you finish the dishes so I can go take a shower? Or can you like take Muggins for one of the walks? Because if I do one more walk, I'm not going to be able to show up for them when they're barking before bedtime.
No, but that makes so much sense. I mean, again, it's like carving out space for taking care of yourself so that you can take care of other people. Like it's put the oxygen mask on your put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And then the other person.
Right. But I think like it's not, the goal is not to be perfect and to never run out of capacity. The goal is to notice when you are out of capacity and you're responding in a way that you don't want to be.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong also, like there, like I feel like I have felt guilty for being out of capacity,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing anything wrong. Like I'm human and I can't do everything. Like it's just not possible. I do have a limit emotionally, and that's also okay. And that's again, what, going back to the quote, it's okay to not be okay. And
Yeah.
it's okay to take space for yourself and to get okay.
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. And I
And
think you just have to say so.
yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm not okay right now, and I need X, Y, and Z to get back to being okay, which is also what I think your question earlier in the podcast about, the flip side.
Mhm.
Um, like I think, yeah, like having the motivation to get back to the okay and know how to get there, in whatever like route that may take you. Sometimes you got to roll around in your shit. Like a friend of mine says that, I've
Yeah.
called her up before and been like, I'm so depressed, I can't get out of bed. And she's like, you know what? Fine. Rolling your shit today. Tomorrow,
Mhm.
you're going to need to get up and we're going to need to talk
Mhm.
about how you're going to do that, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, and so I think that's sort of like going back to what you were asking, like there's the spectrum, like there's the nuance, and
Right.
there's the, all right, I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna roll around in my shit and I'm gonna be in my negative cloud, and then what? Okay, now I gotta put one foot forward and try to focus on the hopeful, right? Focus on how to get there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean minimize your feelings. It doesn't mean like positively talk yourself out of, um, feeling bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It means like making space for both.
Exactly. Exactly. And that feels so damn hard sometimes.
It is really hard.
It's just not easy. It's not easy. It is easier to be black and white, in the short term.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's scary to be not okay, because if you're new to um making space for that, it can be like really scary, like, okay, how am I going to get back to being okay if I allow myself to pause or lay down,
Yeah.
cry?
Yeah. And it's scary to say you're not okay and to not always have the response that you want. And both you and I are describing like that happens with our partners sometimes.
Hmm.
And like how they're not ill intentioned, they're people, they're also at their own capacity. And like how do you deal with that if you tell someone you're not okay?
Yeah,
Like at the same time, that how do you pick yourself up, also.
right.
So yeah, it's like it's a delicate balance and dance. And how do you not beat yourself up and say those sort of like, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, because you do it to yourself too,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And if you're not fine, then you have to admit it to yourself. I'm not fine right now. How am I going to get back to being okay?
Yeah. I've learned that sometimes the path to getting from not okay to okay is through a puddle of tears.
Yeah,
Like you have to just let it
sometimes,
all
yeah.
out and just cry and let it happen. And that's
It's
like
a
really
release.
it is a release. Yeah, like literally stress hormones are released in your tears.
Yes.
You feel better afterward and are more able to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you have a care tip for today?
I do, and I feel ready to move into it because I think it relates to what we were talking about and how to help ourselves get to a place where we might be feeling something difficult. And um, so this care tip is called, well, I called it sitting with discomfort. But
Nice.
what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be oscillating between discomfort and pleasure.
Ooh,
So
okay.
yeah, so it goes discomfort and peace, I would like to say. So it actually goes really well with what we're talking about, that you've got the sort of the two sides of it, and like how do we play with both to
Nice.
get to an okay space.
Oh, cool. This is going to be a great practice.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna have us close our eyes in 3, 2, 1. And I'd like you to take one deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And one more time, in through your nose and let out a big sigh through your mouth. So now I want you to get into your body and notice a place of discomfort in your body. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest or a burning sensation in your belly, or something in your body hurts and that's sort of the focal point of discomfort in your body. And as you sit with it, let it take shape. Is it a square, a triangle, a ball? What shape is it forming into? And what color is it? What color energy? What color shape? Red, green, blue? And what does it feel like? Burning, tightness, pinching. Those are all feelings of discomfort. We're going to sit with it and not judge it and notice it. It's there. It feels uncomfortable. Now, I want you to shift into a space where you are surrounded by surroundings that feel warm, peaceful, calming. Maybe you're enveloped by trees, by clouds. Maybe you're in water or warm sand. What color is the sky, the air? Blue, purple, orange, calming color. And we're going to sit here in peace and calm and warmth. Take a few breaths. And now we're going to move back to the painful, uncomfortable spot that we started with. And we're going to go back to the shape and we're going to sit with that. And we're going to notice, has anything changed? Has the shape changed? Has the color changed? Has it gotten smaller, bigger? We'll sit with that for a little bit. Take a couple breaths. Send the energy into that spot. And now we're going to move back into our harmonious, calm, peaceful space with the trees and birds, or the sand and waves, or the clouds and wind. We're going to hang out here for a little bit. Now we're going to move back to the uncomfortable point shape one more time. And we're going to breathe into it and notice it without judgment. Sit with it. Notice maybe it's gotten smaller now. Less bright. It's fading. And now we'll move in one last time into our peaceful space. We're going to breathe in the air around us, in through the nose, out through the mouth. We're going to hold this feeling with us as we gently come out in 3, 2, 1. Open your eyes when you're ready.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome back.
Thank you. I was at the beach.
I don't know where I was actually, because I was saying all the things. So I was going from one thing to the other.
I really appreciated that. Thank you for leading us through that.
Yeah, it's actually a hypnotherapy mindfulness technique that I used a lot with clients who had trouble sitting with their difficult feeling. So if it was like really bad anxiety or even a traumatic memory before going into them, we would do this to sit with the discomfort and like where it was in their body. So again, it's a way to sit with discomfort, but then also have something calming and warm on the other side of it, so we don't like get lost in the chaos of discomfort.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can dip a toe in and then out again and then go back in, and you can feel like you're building the skill of getting out, it sounds like, so that you can go deeper in.
Yes, exactly. So it's again, it's going through that spectrum of like difficult and positive, difficult, positive, negative, positive.
Right. Yeah. I really liked the imagery also. And also just like the connection with like, okay, where in the body do I feel sad, or where in the body do I feel scared? Or, I think that awareness of the physical sensations related to the emotions is really important.
Yes. Yeah. And the body keeps a score. Like we hold on to our negative emotions physically. Or negative things that have happened to us. And remember, like when we have the tendency to be toxically positive, like oftentimes it's because we have trouble sitting with our own difficult feelings also, so this is an exercise that can help with that.
Yeah, it can help you to like know to be more aware of the physical discomfort so that you can have more cues to tell yourself what you need.
Yes, absolutely. So, I guess that wraps up this episode. Next week we'll be talking about, or next episode we'll be talking about toxic positivity with dogs. And I'm excited for that conversation. I always love our episodes about dogs because they always come out not at all like how we expect them to. So, should we do some really quick updates about our businesses before wrapping up?
Yeah, definitely. What updates does Cloud Doodles have?
Cloud Doodles. Well, we're launching Christmas. Everything is Christmas right now. I'm really excited. We have a new print and then 2 prints from last year. So keep an eye out for that, and holiday bundles and lots of focus on that. And in terms of mental health content, I think we'll be talking about gratitude this month a lot. So this month of November, and it sort of has become an annual thing to discuss just mental health around the holidays because it can be a really difficult time for people. And I've got a great human sweater or sweater, mug, or ornament that says, "This Christmas I'll be spending on the couch with my dog." So if that's what you want to do this Christmas, that's what I'll be doing.
Same. That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
How is it going with you?
It's going well. I just did an expert panel with Marilyn Mele, who founded the Dog Wisdom Workshop. And I believe that is going to be available for purchase on her website. So we'll put that in the footnotes. And what I did in the expert panel was I talked about the sensory overload volcano concept that helps us to have a visual framework for recognizing that when our dogs are having those big explosive reactions, that there's a lot under the surface that contributes to that, and helps us to like have a way to understand what's contributing to those big reactions, and also like provide agency for like problem solving and getting ahead of the next reaction, by making some changes, and basically like focusing on the exposure to various sensations like sounds and lights and types of touch and things like that that might be contributing to your dog's experience of stress and overloading their capacity. And so I have a sensory overload volcano workbook that's free on my website. So you can go and grab it there, or you can also get it through Marilyn Mele's expert panel.
Sounds great.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And see you next episode.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Even though we are licensed professionals in our own field of work, Angela, LCSW, Sharon, OTD, and CDBC, this podcast is not intended to replace individual therapy for humans or behavior support for dogs. We approach our conversations from an exploratory, observational, and strictly personal lens.
If you are struggling with your mental health, your dog's behavior, or if you or your dog have experienced a recent traumatic event, please see the resources section on our websites for a list of resources and places that can help. Visit either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.cloudddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. This podcast is made possible by the collaboration between Cloud Doodles and Human Canine Collaborative. Check out our websites at www.clouddoodles.com or www.hc-collab.com. Special thanks to Tom Fox at Tom Fox Photos for support with editing and production consulting. You can find Tom at tomfoxphotos.com. Also, special thanks to sound effects and story examples from Duchess and Muggins. We could not and would not ever want to do this without you.